Welcome back to Food for Health 2024. Yay! Can you believe that just came out of my mouth? 2024, that is hard to take in. Time really flies. So I've gotten a few inquiries about my sous chef. I lost her to the snow tonight. We finally got snow, so she decided to stay home and play in it. So she'll probably see you next time. Anyway, so I see a couple new faces. Just for those who have not been here before, my name is Sheryl McWIlliams. I'm a wellness specialist here at Midcoast Parkview Health, and we're glad that you're here. Tonight, we're going to make a Western chili, which is a little bit different than what I normally make, because I'm from the South, right? So down South, we tend to make things smoky, and out West, they tend to make them a little bit more spicy, right? So I didn't make it very spicy for you tonight because not everyone likes spice. And I have a confession to make. I did the dumbest thing. I had a total blonde moment. So I made the chili last night, right? And my refrigerator was quite full of other things. So I thought, well, I'll just stick the pot out in the car because it'll be safe there. No critters are going to get to it, right? And it's obviously going to be plenty cold, right? So when I went out there this afternoon about 3:30 to get it out of the car, you know, to warm it up, it was a solid block of ice. I mean solid block of ice, and it's thick. There was no defrosting that on my stove, right? And I thought, I prayed, I'm like, Lord, you gotta help me because I got people to feed tonight. And so I put it in a pot of water and poured boiling water on it, and, you know, so it's getting warm. It has officially defrosted, but just know that we had a time with your chili tonight. So, okay, let's get started. So we do a pepper. I do like green pepper for the color, but if I don't have green pepper, I'll use red or orange or, you know, whatever I've got. For the peppers, I don't buy everything organic. But there are some things that I always buy organic, some things that I'll only buy organic, and some things that I really try to buy organic, right? And peppers is one of them. If you look up what's called the Dirty Dozen, that's sort of the top 12 things that you might want to consider getting organic if you can, and peppers is one of them. So when I can get them organic, I do. And they're not always available, but usually they are. So that's the pepper. Now you'll notice that I just threw that stem in the trash. At home, I wouldn't do that. I would save that stem along with any other scraps, say the ends of my onions or the ends of my carrot or whatever. And I would cover that with water. Also, papers from garlic. I would cover that with water and let it simmer on the back of my stove for a nice vegetable broth. And if I don't have enough of the scraps, like this little bit that I'm making tonight, I won't have enough scraps. So I'll save them for a few days. Sometimes I'll put it in a mason jar in the fridge, or a little, you know, bowl in the fridge, and then make the broth. Because there's a lot of nutrition in our scraps that we often throw away. So we've got our green pepper, got our onion here. Now, when I make the broth, when I save my scraps for broth, I save these ends of the onion, but I won't save just the paper. If you save just the paper, it can make it a little bitter. But the end with a little bit of paper on the end is fine. That makes a fantastic broth.
Sheryl, does it make any difference, or do you have a preference for type of onions?
Good question.
Yellow, red?
Good question. I don't normally cook with Vidalia onions. They're sweet, but they don't have a lot of I like to use Vidalia onions in things that are not cooked, so salads and, you know, that kind of thing. Otherwise, If you can get like a mixture of onions, that adds a dimension to your food. So maybe a yellow onion with a purple onion. I normally use whatever we grow. We grew a lot of purple onions this year, but they were small. They didn't come out very big. So if you can combine the colors, that's great. But if you can't, these happen to be just regular white onions, then that's fine. But it is nice if you can use different colors. Normally when I do onions, I use great big onions. This happens to be 2 smaller ones. So if I had 2 smaller ones of different colors, then I would use that. So I'm one of those that if a little onion is good, a whole lot is better. Fortunately, my husband likes onions as well, so we get along fine. Garlic too. So I'm not going to bore you by chopping the second onion, but you get the idea. You want plenty of onion, about 1.5 cups, 2 cups, 2.5, and then garlic. So for those of you who've been here before, you've heard me say I get my garlic in bulk and I whiz it up in a food processor. I smear that in a ice cube tray and I freeze it. So I have little ice cubes of garlic when I need it. Lot more flavor than what you get in the little jar, and I don't always have time or take the time, you know, to do it fresh every time. Yes, ma'am.
When you do that in the ice cube tray, how does it measure out as far as like 1 cube? What would that equal?
So it depends on the size of the garlic. I like bigger garlic, so you know, yeah, jumbo. So probably 3 to 4. But again, if a little garlic is good, a lot is better. So if it calls for like 3 garlics, I'll use a cube, 1.5 cubes, 2 cubes, because I love it. It's good for you, right? So, all right, so we've got our onion, our green pepper, our garlic, and we're just going to saute that a little bit. I use a little bit of water to saute it. Because our chili's still warming up, we're going to let that continue to warm up. So that it will be warm for you. But you can just imagine that you're, well, let me see how we're doing over here. Maybe we're okay. I don't want it to stick. I think we'll take it off. Okay. Here we go. Turn the heat up here. So we're going to saute that down until the vegetables are tender. Now, you can just do this, or I did not tonight, but when I make chili, I normally add carrot, especially if it's a real sweet carrot. I'll add carrot, and here's where I would do that. And you're just going to let that saute. When I saute vegetables, like onions and garlic and pepper and that sort of thing, I like to add a little bit of salt. This recipe actually does not call for salt, but I do add a little bit of salt because it brings out the flavor of the onion and the garlic in particular. So not a lot, probably about 1/4 teaspoon. Just to bring out the flavor of the garlic and the onion. And it really does make a difference. I have a soup recipe that I make, my family just loves. It's a Dutch potato soup. And I forgot to saute the onions and garlic in the salt. My family was not interested in that soup. Yeah, it makes a big difference. And for your recipes that call for salt, you can often get away with using less salt because your tongue only tastes the salt on the exterior of the food, right? So by salting the onions and garlic, that then is permeating your food, so you can get away with using less salt if you will saute your veggies in a little bit. All right, so that's moving along nicely. Next, we're going to add our spices. Now, this does call for cayenne pepper. I did not add cayenne pepper to yours tonight because a lot of people can't tolerate that. When I do use cayenne pepper, I just use a little because a little bit goes a very long way. So we've got our chili, we've got our cumin. We've got oregano. I know the recipe calls for 1/8 of a teaspoon. Yeah, meh. So I put a whole teaspoon in. And then paprika. Now, I will tell you, I really do like in chili, I like that smoky, that kind of smoky flavor. And so I cheated and I added a little bit of smoked paprika. Not a lot, but just a little to give me some of that flavor. Now I put those seasonings in. They're sauteing in those vegetables. And just like the salt helps the salt in the vegetables when you saute it permeates the food. When you put your seasonings in like this, it's going to permeate it as well.
Ask a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, you are sauteing that in water instead
Yes.
of olive oil.
Ooh.
So is there,
Why?
flavor? Why?
Yeah, why am I doing that? So, when we add heat to oil, it oxidizes it, and that becomes kind of an unhealthy thing. Also, when we are dealing with people who have diabetes, heart disease, some of these more chronic conditions, oil can impact that. And Dr. Howe, actually, who's our speaker tonight, has done some amazing talks on that issue. I don't think that's a topic he's going to necessarily get into tonight, but I encourage you to keep coming because that's something that we do talk about from time to time. Very rarely will I saute in oil for this kind of thing. It's usually water. If it's not water, then it's vegetable broth, or sometimes the water that I've cooked corn in or steamed vegetables in to add a dimension of flavor, but I typically won't use the oil. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to add is this happens to be groats. You can use barley, you can use wheat berries, you can use any of those things. This is the whole oat that I cooked. And we use this sometimes in the place of rice. I use it just like rice. I'll use it in the place of, say, hamburger. So typically chili has hamburger in it, right? Something chewy. So that's the purpose of this groat. It's kind of giving you that chewy something or other. And by putting it now in with all of these spices, it's going to flavor it nicely.
What's your recipe for cooking groats?
2 to 1, just like rice. Yep, just like rice. So 2 cups of water to 1 cup of grain. Wheat berries is what flour is made from. It's a grain. It's the whole grain of the wheat. Yeah. Do what's that?
You just buy that in Hannaford?
So you can't buy it at Hannaford. You can get it at any of your natural food stores. You could use rice. You could use brown rice in this. I have actually seen wheat berries at the Hannaford over in Cook's Corner, the one closer to Shaw's. So because that was chilled overnight, you know, it's kind of clumpy, so I'm just breaking those clumps up. Yes, ma'am.
Is another name for wheatberry spelt?
Say that again?
Is another name for wheatberry spelt?
No, that's its own thing.
Okay, because I was at Rising Tide the other day and I was looking for wheatberries and couldn't find it, but then they said,
But that is a type of wheat.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so then we're gonna add our beans. Now I cheated tonight and I bought canned beans. I actually prefer to make my own beans, but I didn't. So we've got dark red kidney beans. I just drained them. We've got black beans. Again, I just drained them. Do what's that? I did not rinse them. And we've got pinto beans. Now, in the chili that I made for you tonight, there's not a single pinto bean in there, because this was literally the only can of organic pinto beans I could find at the grocery store. So in yours, well, no, that's not true. There was one other can there, but it was almost $5. I'm too cheap for that. So in your chili tonight, there are garbanzo beans and a little cannellini, a few little cannellini beans in the place of the pinto beans. The point being, you don't have to be exact, right? If there's a bean you don't like or a bean that you're sensitive to, well, you can use a different bean.
Is there anything that can be done to make the beans less gaseous for the next day?
Yes. Okay. So if you cook them yourself, here's the trick. And that's what I prefer to do. It's cheaper, it's healthier, and you get to control what goes in it. You wash them really well. A dried bean, you wash them really well. You soak them overnight. You pour that water off, rinse them again, and then you cook them. The mistake that a lot of people make when they cook beans is they cook them in the water that they soaked them in, and that creates a lot of gas. Another thing that you can do is actually sprout the bean. We've done a class on sprouting beans before, and that's a lot of fun. It takes a little bit of time, so pre-planning, but if you will sprout them simply by rinsing them, washing them just like you would, soak them just like if you were going to cook them, and then instead of cooking them, you spread them out in a colander and rinse them day and night. So rinse them in the morning and drain them, rinse them in the evening and drain them. Each bean takes a little bit longer to sprout. For example, in my house, lentils will sprout in less than 24 hours. A pinto bean in my house usually takes about 2 days to sprout. Each one will take a little bit of time. I've had soybeans take longer to sprout, but if you sprout them, that dramatically reduces the amount of aromatosis that you might get from eating beans.
So you rinse them and then you lay them out on a tray or something?
I rinse them and then I put them in like a colander, like a drainer, but I pull it up on the side so that the beans, you know, are exposed to the air. And then you rinse them at least twice a day. You want to make sure they're good and clean. So then we're going to add some tomato paste, or you can use fresh tomatoes, about 1.5 cups if it's fresh. And this is about 1/4 cup of tomato paste.
Cheryl?
Yes.
And don't they also rinse and soak the beans to get rid of the lectins?
Can you address that?
Yes, that's what you do. You soak them and you cook them. Cooking beans gets rid of the lectins. There is a physician online who will remain nameless that likes to sell supplements to you, and he talks a lot about lectins, but he neglects to mention that the healthiest cultures in the world eat lots of beans.
And when
And
he says
lectins are not an issue unless you eat your beans raw, which I don't know anybody that does that.
And when he says lots of beans, truly lots of beans. How many of you have heard the name Galen Johnson? You know who Dr. Galen Johnson was? Well, Dr. Johnson used to eat beans every single day. He had his own little personal crock pot because his wife didn't really care for beans as much as he did. And on their 50th wedding anniversary, we gave them a box of 50 one-pound bags of beans. You know, we gave that to him and we gave her a nose plug. They ate off those beans for quite some time. All right, so we've got our vegetables, we've got our beans, we've got our seasoning, we've got our tomato paste. What we don't have is our tomatoes because I forgot them at home. I was actually going to put in fresh tomatoes because I have some that need to be used, so I'll add those later when I get home. But you get the idea. And then you just, you warm it up, you cook it. Now I do find that this is really good the next day. You know, some leftovers just really aren't so hot. This is actually really good as a leftover. That's why I made yours last night instead of today, because I prefer it. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Can we go back to the salt?
Yes.
Do you have recommendations, like are some salts, sea salt, kosher salt? I saw you were using pink salt. Are there any pros and cons now?
There are a variety of pros and cons. Celtic salt is a really nice choice. I use the pink salt here because I can buy it in bigger bulks and it's more affordable. I avoid regular like white table salt for a whole host of reasons. But yeah, I really like the Celtic salt. Do you have a comment on that?
So you can make your own salt if you go out in the ocean and a ways and just dip some up and dehydrate it. Basically, an unrefined salt has more than just sodium chloride in it. It has multiple other minerals, magnesium and potassium, and there's some good studies that show that a well-balanced salt, a natural unrefined salt, has less effect on your blood pressure. You can also use a little less because it has a better flavor. The only thing you're missing is iodine, which is important, and you need to have a source of iodine in your diet, which you don't get unless the salt is iodinized. But apart from that, we don't in our home use any white table salt either because the flavor is better and you can use a little less with a unrefined salt. Whether it's pink Himalayan or whether it's Celtic salt, or if you just take a boat ride out there and get 10 gallons of ocean water, bring it back, you can just let it dry and you'll have nice salt. Where do you get your iodine? You can get it in seaweed.
So if you do try doing your own sea salt, which is actually a whole lot of fun, be really careful where you harvest that water, because rivers coming in, streams coming in, that is not where you want to harvest that water because of the contaminants. But it's a lot of fun to do. Okay, we are going to transition to our talk now, and we'll have our samples afterwards.